Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to Patch Management Part 1, where we're going to be diving all into the Patch Manager overview and the setup.
I'm Arthur.
I'm Devin, also known as DBB. Now, this is part of a multi-part webinar series that Arthur's going to be doing. I'm interchangeable. I'm not necessary. Some of the other SMEs are going to be popping in and out, helping out Arthur out. But we're going to be diving into the soup to nuts, the entire patching process.
Yes, we are.
Right.
Absolutely. Now, we're about to start on the walkthrough of the Patch Manager and all the screens and what they are used for and how to manipulate them and where the commands are. So without any ado, shall we?
Let's do it.
Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is how to see the condition of your patching from the dashboard. The dashboard is very similar to the dashboard on a car, is that it gives you all the statistics of what's happening in your car right then. And like the car, it doesn't give you all the details. Sure, the temperature gauge shows you if it's hot or cold, but what's that mean? Is it good for your car? Is it bad for your car? It'll tell you your gas level. That is easily interpretable. It'll tell you how fast you're going. That is very easily interpretable. But the engine light, you have to look into that much more. We're going to show you how to find that in Patch Manager. You'll be able to find what patches are available for your devices on the patching screen. You'll learn what devices have installed what patches on the devices screen. They're sort of polar opposites. You'll see where to approve patches manually on the approval screen, and we'll understand how to automate your patching using configuration, because the real power of this tool is making it automated so that patches are approved automatically each month, or really each couple of days as they're released from Microsoft. Patch Tuesday is a thing of the past. Let's get into it. This is the dashboard, and you can see the many dials and gauges on it. We're going to break these down for you right now. On the left side, in the top corner, is the clients directory, the client display. This is a filter. It allows you to pick a global view of all your clients, and that's what we have selected here. You can see global is selected in blue. It is giving us the overall compliance on the top left corner. This would be the amount of patches that you've assigned a goal: install, ignore, or deny. And the amount of patches from that list that have actually done that. Compliance. Have they installed, ignored, or denied these patches? Yes or no? That's compliance. So you can use the clients filter to filter down to a location or a client. We have our mythical clients in here: B-Claw, Chris Craft Boats, and the sub headers underneath them, the locations. And if you clicked on B-Claw, you'd get the computer's patch stats for just B-Claw. So that acts as a very broad filter. Below that is the granular filters section. This allows you to filter down for patching stage, OS type, what particular operating system they're using. You can see under workstations, this system has a Windows 10 box and a Windows 8.1, and it lists all the operating systems that we're currently patching on. So if there was a Windows XP that we're patching, it would appear as one of those choices to filter. Below that we have servers, and then we have the more granular objects like the manufacturer of the patch, which comes into play when we're talking about third-party patching, and severity and other categories that we'll find later on. These allow you to change the information on the rest of the display. So if we've picked global and we have the filters clear, as we do here, so that we're not filtering anything, we have the entire database displayed. So up top is the status bar, where the overall compliance number was, as I discussed earlier. 94% compliance is pretty great. Daytime patching, the number of computers that are on daytime patching right now. Daytime patching is a neat little deal where you have a scheduled event for patching. Let's say it's at 7 o'clock at night, and the computer is off at 7 o'clock. It can't patch. It misses the window. If you have daytime patching selected on the Windows Update policy, Microsoft Update policy, pardon me, as soon as that computer turns on the next morning or the next week or the next month, it will start patching as soon as the delay that you select is over. It will patch silently in the background, and it will not reboot. This gets the patching done, gives that computer a reboot needed flag, and it can roll on with its day. It can happen in the background, and it will not interfere with the user. They won't even know it's happening.
So when will that reboot?
It will reboot the next time it's in a reboot window.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about hey, my CEO, he's always out in the field, he's always doing something else for my customer. I really don't want him rebooting when he finally does open up his computer.
That's bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to cost me some money. So this way I can get those patches installed on the system, and then when it's safe to reboot, like let's say I put it sometime after hours between 6 and 9 p.m., then it's going to reboot the system then, and we should be good to go.
All it requires is for his computer to be online at the time.
Fantastic.
So with this in mind, it's kind of a great idea to establish regular patching days that company A is going to get, client A will be patched on Monday, client B on Tuesday. This way, client A knows they got to leave all their computers on Monday night to complete their patching. It's a great idea to work this into the contract you have with your clients so that they're responsible for leaving their computers on, because we can't patch it if it's not on. It's important to note that reboots are not always required. There are 3 kinds of patches that Microsoft puts out. There are additions to lists. These are generally antivirus, where you have a list of possible threats and you're just adding to a list. It's basically a text document. This is never in memory and it never needs a reboot afterwards. The second type of patch is something that changes the code of a bit that's not in memory. If it's not actually in the kernel at the time, you don't need to reboot. The only time you need to reboot is if the patch that's been installed changes the code that's currently in the CPU, in the kernel. You can't change something that's running, so you have to reboot. That's the purpose of it. So the daytime patching, jobs running, would be a patching job running right now. No patch inventory refers to if the computer can't see Windows Update, the website. If it can't see Windows Update, it can't download patches. That means the patch inventory doesn't exist. So no patch inventory is a mechanical thing. It means there's a network problem at the other end, some sort of firewall, a rule, and this computer literally can't reach out to Windows Update.
And that's one of the things that I know a lot of our partners sometimes get confused because they think, oh, Automate is patching my systems for me. We're really the middleman. We're managing that patching, correct?
Yes,
That's
sir.
how things work?
That's it.
So it's really the Windows Update agent is doing all the heavy lifting for downloading, getting those reboots scheduled and things of that nature. We're just telling that what to do. So that's a very big distinction I really like to hammer home for people.
Our patching, when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, is we tell it when we want it to patch, we schedule it. We tell it how we want it to reboot, and then we tell it what we want it to patch. We approve of patches. We approve of, and approving, pardon me, I almost said improving. Approving consists of installing, or ignoring, or denying. There's also removing. But the first 3 are the primary: install, ignore, remove, deny, pardon me. So those are the only 3 things that we actually do with patching. After we schedule it, we send a list of patches that has to be sent to the endpoints. And when that patch appointment, the schedule, occurs, that computer sends up to Microsoft Windows Update a list of the patches we wanted to install. They get downloaded directly onto that computer. We never download patches onto the Automate server. We download a list of patches from Microsoft that we pick through and approve. This way, there's a lot less bandwidth flying around between servers, and things go directly to the endpoint where they're going to be installed. And that's pretty much it. We totally shamelessly use Microsoft's patching system to do it because they're the people that write this stuff. And by sticking as close as possible to their system, we have the most success. The other ones are pending reboot, which, as DBB just pointed out, if something needs to reboot, it gets a hanging reboot flag. And if it doesn't have a chance to actually complete the reboot, that flag sticks with it, and it shows up in the pending reboot window on the Patch Manager dashboard. Interestingly, if you click on any of these numbers, if you click on a 0, nothing happens, but if you click on a 1 under the no patch inventory, you get taken to the computer that has no patch inventory. Straightforward. WSUS enabled, Windows Server Update Service is what WSUS stands for. It is Microsoft's method of doing automatic patching. And it uses something very similar to what we do. You set a schedule and you approve of a list of patches, but you have to do it in the Microsoft method, and this is outside the scope of what we're talking about today. All we have to know is that if you have a computer that's using WSUS, it shows up under WSUS enabled. This way you can tell what you can't patch.
Sure, that's a good way, because I know some partners, they're taking over other clients, things of that nature. Someone might have had a WSUS server set up at your client in a previous time. So this is a great way to get a snapshot. Oh, this is a random server that I didn't know about. Let me take a look at that, see what services are running. If I'm taking ownership of all the patching that's going on in these systems, let me disable that, get this cleared up, so reuse the server for something else,
Exactly.
and then put it on the automate patching setup.
Precisely.
All right.
The out-of-date WUA would be the Windows Update Agent, which DBV was mentioning earlier. That's the part of the software that does the heavy lifting for patching. It's literally the part that reaches out to Windows Update. This is out of date, and this is a flag because in March of 2015, Microsoft stopped updating Windows 7 and their WUA, and that meant that all the Windows 7 boxes couldn't patch. This was coincidentally, I believe, on the same day that Windows 10 was released.
Weird.
Funny how that happens. So
Surprising.
they had to patch this by hand. We had to update Windows Update Agents by hand for several years. They've seemed to have fixed this, but we're leaving this feature in the product just in case something happens again where Windows Update Agents are not being updated. Missing baselines. When Windows is installed on your computer, it installs several patches automatically. These patches enable it to see Windows Update. And if you're missing baselines, somehow when you were installing Windows, one of those 3 baseline patches was not installed, or more, or all 3. But whatever it is, if you're missing one, you can't see Windows Update. So there's only 3 patches. You can install them by hand. You click on that tile. It takes you to the computers that are missing them, and you follow RKB on how to resolve missing baselines. That is very straightforward. Matter of fact, I understand there's going to be a button coming out for that soon, because it should have been a button long ago, because it's always the same 3 patches. So let's make that automatic.
Absolutely.
And that's the complete current status bar. Now, below that in the right corner, we have one of the 3 deployment dials. Deployment and compliance are very similar. As I said, compliance is the number of patches you've told to install divided by the number of patches that have actually installed. And that is a percentage, so we have 94%. At the moment, we have an identical number in production, but that's not necessarily always the case. Production is a circular, deployment is a circular graph. It always totals 100%. And it is a ratio between the number of patches that have installed, the number of patches that are not attempted, and the number of patches that have failed. So 94% deployment means 394 patches are installed and 26 are yet to be attempted. And that works out to 94%. It's a straight average. Nothing mysterious about that. But this gives you the breakdown of what patches are on those systems, what are not. You click on those numbers, just like any of the other interactive boxes up top, up there. And if you click on those numbers, it'll take you directly to the 394 patches that have been installed on your system. And you'll be able to work through those and figure out, okay, the 26 did not install, let's figure out why. Have they not had a chance to install yet? Has the install date in the future? You can find that out through the discovery processes we're going to show you. That is that circular graph, and we pull up the compliance gauges at the bottom. Again, this word compliance. There's more than one way to rate a patch. There are the categories, which we're going to go into, which are the broad categories defined by Microsoft in their patching. Critical, drivers, things like that. There's severity, which is a Microsoft gauged and rated setting that in their mind describes how severe this patch is to your security. A critical patch is something that in their mind should be installed immediately, bar nothing. It's life-saving and critical, and then it goes important, moderate, low, and unspecified. I think that Microsoft's severity gauges are less than objective. They have all the Microsoft Office patches listed as critical. I'm not sure they are.
If I can't use Word, I can't do my job though, Murph.
It's true, but you don't need all of the Office patches to do Word.
Yeah, true. Fair enough.
And some of them are little like adjustments for Silverlight or something like this that is very particular, or this is only if you're using it on one foot. So they could be necessary, that they're probably important. Critical, I think they're gaming that system.
Okay.
which gives us an objective choice on the right, CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. There's a group called NIST that is not Microsoft, is not Automate, is not any one of the major companies. This is a bunch of people, researchers on the internet that are posting this rating so that people have an objective thing to follow. The federal government uses CVSS to rate their patches. So I tend to stick with the 3 gauges on the CVSS scale: the high, 10 to 7, medium, 6.9 to 4, and low, 3.9 to 0. If a patch says 8, I'm going to install it. I just am. It might be bad, it might break later on, but I'd rather have something that CVSS rates as pants on fire, emergency, install this now, which is their high level stuff. I'd rather have that in my system and have it fail than have the vulnerability which it is supposed to protect against strike my system. In general, I'm more proactive in that I prefer to have something on my system that may be bad than if it's voted as critical somewhere.
Sure.
Than if something is maybe, gee, I don't know, let's see if everybody else tries it out. I know they say it's going to solve my computer from bleeding to death, but I want to see if it does any bad stuff.
Sure. And one of the things that we didn't talk about just yet is we also have those test and pilot stages. So I can definitely understand why someone would say, okay, all of those critical CVSS scores, anything from 10 to 7, I want to immediately push that over to my test stage.
Absolutely.
Test stage. I can speak English. That way I can check these on machines. I know these are common machines that my clients have. These are the ones that are out there in the wild, in all my environments. Let's see if it breaks anything on them. If it's already good on them, then I might escalate that through the different stages that we have between the pilot and the production.
Yep.
One thing that I did want to point out, while Microsoft severity, you might have, everyone has their own feelings on that. Also, you have to think about who's going to be rating you on your score.
Yep.
If your client says, hey, I'm only concerned about those Microsoft severities, then that's what you really should be focusing on, because I'm making sure those critical and important installs are gone to your system, because that's what they're going to be rating you for. I believe HIPAA uses the severity instead of the CVSS.
Yep.
So it really does. So if you have a bunch of doctor's offices, then you're going to be using that piece. If you have a bunch of government contracts, then you're going to want to use those CVSS scores. So it really depends on your environment and what you're doing with your client. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you have both of these available to you for every patch. So you'll be able to make your own judgments on what you think is going to be essential to be installing. And as DBB says, we have this staging system that allows you to put, in theory, one of each of your type of computers at your own office into the test stage. So this way, if something blows up, a patch blows up a computer, it's right there in front of you and you can fix it and you can find out what the problem is. Assuming it passes that, you pass it on to the pilot stage, which would have those same type of computers at your clients, because your clients have different software and they have very particular things that they're going to use. And you ask them, do you have a computer that you consider to be sacrificial or that you don't mind going down? Or maybe let's say we're going to use a duplicate of something, because you can spin up a VM of pretty much any production object and use that as a test.
Usually for my test environment, the new guys that I have on my team, they get put in there. That one guy I really don't like in sales, he gets put in the test environment.
Oh, yeah.
So I get to push those patches out, see if I get any phone calls or emails of things breaking, then I work on it and go from there. Yeah. Pilot, it's okay. I've done my initial testing, nothing caught on fire. Let's move it out to a broader group, and then we set it out into the wild and see if anything happens there.
Sure.
It gives you a good chance to go through those stages, give you a little bit of wiggle room before you go ahead and put it out into production.
Kind of testing patch laboratory.
Sure.
Very cool. So that is compliance. Those are the stages. And we're going to click on the top left, it looks like a puzzle piece in the corner of your screen. That's going to take us to the patches screen. Ooh. This is the patches display. It's global patches. It is not the check mark in the top right corner, which is the approval section. This shows you patches and the computers they can apply to. We have a blue highlight here on Microsoft 404.1085, which I'm going to refer to as 1234567 because it's a generic patch. I picked it randomly. And it is a .NET framework patch that is 100% deployed. It's got a green bar there. The one above it is 0% deployed. It's not in any computers. And the highlighted patch shows a single computer in the bottom. This means that the TIM VM at Chris-Craft is the only one that uses this .NET, the only one it's installed on, and 100% deployment means this is 100% of the computers it can install on. So this is entirely correctly installed on every computer that can take it.
Nice.
We found this out just by looking at the display with a single glance. Let's walk through the display. We have the same clients top left that we had in the previous display. This reuses a lot of the same real estate to give you the same look and feel. It really is helpful for me when I'm going through it and I have to do the same thing over and over again. It's very handy. The top client section, as we said, is the gross filter. It filters out client location, and you can drill down to single computers up top with that. And again, it's just going to show you the, if we're going to pick the BClaw choice again, it'll show you the BClaw computers that would apply to that Microsoft patch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it would show you the computers there. It would show you none because there are no computers in BClaw that run it. There's only one in Chris-Craft. Oh, pardon me. Touchscreen. I can has it.
Future.
Coming on. So the client there, and then we have the full range of filters below it. Is exactly the same as the filters display on the dashboard. I'll add one extra feature that was on the dashboard that I did not discuss, the filter. We can save filter settings in presets. So let's say you have client A, Chris-Craft, and you know that you're going to want to look for their servers every time because Chris-Craft servers have troubles and you want to be able to zoom in. And every time you get to this screen, you want to look at that first. You'd save it under default filters and just pull it down. And there would be your Chris-Craft filter, and there's the computers.
That's really handy.
It really is.
Yeah. So I could see if you have a bunch of law office or something like that, I know the primary thing for them is email, making sure that's up and running all the time. So if you want to narrow down to just your Exchange servers and make sure everything's copacetic with those, you can go ahead and do that with that filter.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Plus, there's about 25 settings for this filter.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of things you can do with it, and it takes time to set it up to get the results you want.
Sure.
So this is a do it once and repeat it forever
Oh,
thing.
awesome. So then I put those filters in. I'm like, oh, I have to do that every single time? No, I can just save it, name it something descriptive, like we do with everything in Automate.
Because we don't like doing things the same way twice.
Yeah.
Automate, let's do it automatically.
Fantastic.
And we pull down the top patches section, which, as I said, these are all the patches. We're looking at global, if you remember, in the top left corner. So these are all the patches in the system. The patches in the system are pulled down from Microsoft Windows Update based on the operating systems you have that you're patching and the software that's loaded on them. It's added into one big list, and this is the list of all the patches that can apply to all those computers. And this is where you decide and figure out, okay, what's patching on what's not patching. You can find your way through. As I said, we have the deployment gauge, we have compliance, and in this case, again, they are identical. We have the release date. That is the day this patch was released by Microsoft, the born-on date if you prefer. The age is the number of days it's been out in the wild. And that is a direct pull off the date. The KBID, that is literally the patch ID number. And that's a hot link. If you click on that, you go directly to the Microsoft site that shows you all the different care and feeding aspects of this patch. If it can be uninstalled, for example, because not all of them can be.
Yeah.
And it'll give you prerequisites for it and what might go wrong with it. It's basically a whole lot like the safety label on a bottle of medicine. So this is the description of it, the title, that's the operating system it applies to. This is the category. If you recall, we were talking about category being a way to select patches. All these are updates. Severity, none of those have severity except for the bottom one, which is important. Microsoft may or may not assign a severity to patches. It's entirely up to them. That's their sorting system. CVSS, there's none of those available for these patches. Patch flags. What those mean is this one may require a reboot. That circle swirly arrow. And down below, this one can be uninstalled. That's what the up arrow means. And the swirly next to it means that this one probably is going to require a reboot. That's the entire patches display. But when you click on any one of these patches, the window below it, device deployments, shows you the computer to which it can install on, and if it has indeed installed. This one has 99% compliance. It is approved to install. It is installed on this computer.
Fantastic.
Pretty solid. Now, one extra thing, those device deployments, those are buttons. The first one is Wake on LAN. The second one is Install Right Now. So this Microsoft patch, if it wasn't already installed, because this is the computer that's selected for it, if we click Install Now, that patch installs right now. No schedule, no waiting, it happens right then. The up arrow is Uninstall Right Now. This is if it can be uninstalled, which you can see down there, this one can be. The little puzzle piece there is an interesting choice. This is disabling daytime patching. For some reason you want to turn off daytime patching for this computer, you can do it there with that button. And the round circle arrow is reboot this computer right now. And those are the function buttons you can use in line. They skip the whole schedule thing, and they're going to be for installing zero-day patches, like I have to get these 5 computers fixed right now. So you highlight the patch, you get the 5 computers that can install it below, you highlight them all, you hit install now. You're done. And you can even reboot them.
Oh, fantastic. Obviously, you're going to want to communicate with your client before you do that.
Yeah, you do.
But for example, back in the day when WannaCry was a huge thing and we needed to patch a lot of machines rather quickly, call your client up, hey, saw an emergent threat, this is something that's critical, we're concerned about your systems, we want to make sure that you're safe and secure, we're going to have to do an emergency patch cycle right now. Oh, you can't do that, I'm in the middle of a project. Well, then that's when you have to have that conversation with them. What's more important, all of your company's information or this one particular project that it's going to take me maybe an hour to patch everything up for you? I'll send somebody on site to make sure everything's great. Great, fantastic, we're in agreement. Let's go ahead and get these machines patched up to keep you safe.
Patching is about security.
Absolutely.
Patching is not an optional thing. It is mandatory, and if you're not keeping up with your patches, your systems are vulnerable. Yeah. And now we click that little flat screen monitor icon, which is going to take us to the devices screen. This is exactly the same as the patches screen. It's just reversed. In the top half of the window we have computers. You click on that, you get all the patches that apply to that computer. The previous screen was patches sorted by computers. This screen is computers sorted by patches.
Okay, so it's really the same information, just displayed in a different way.
Because a lot of times it's important to see the other side of this, and before we're focusing on the patches, this is focusing on the devices. And the devices are, of course, computers. So I wanted to say that because I was confused the first time I saw this screen. Again, the real estate is the same. We have these same client filters, client and location. They changed the the display for the devices. You get less computers or more focused computers. That way, the lower window, again, same filters, same save filter. This is repeated. The same filters that you've saved in the patches screen are also going to be here in the devices screen. So you can literally reuse that same filter again and again and again to get the same view here that you had in the patches screen, which makes your information easily relatable. The top half, as we discussed, these are the computers. As we highlight them, you have the compliance number per computer, the deployment number per computer, because remember, the dashboard had the total averages for your system, or your client, or your location. These are per computer. And the device flags, as before, the X, the cross inside the circle with a little X beside it, those are offline. The ones beside it, you can wake them up if you like. And this one here, the LT training server, that is up and running.
Yeah, fantastic.
Nice to see all this info just there.
Just add a snap.
Yep. Now, the buttons up top here are very similar to the buttons in the last window. Wake on LAN. The one next to it is update your patch inventory. And then the circle next to it is reboot as always. And the slash through the puzzle piece is another one of the remove daytime patching with a different icon this time. Then there's set stage, which is a new button that allows us to set the stage for more than one computer at a time. Remember, we have the pilot stage, the test stage, and the production stage. All computers start out in production, and if you highlight them, right now we've got Chris Craft Tim VM highlighted. If you click set stage, you'd be able to change Tim VM to either pilot or test, because right now he's in production. You can also change it down there under patching stage in the bottom half, in the patches section. That light blue production, that's because TimVM is a production computer right now. By clicking on that, you can just update that. You can also update his patch inventory simply by clicking on resend, which is going to get a list of new patches for him, if any, from Microsoft.
Sure, fresh data.
Right.
If you've had a machine that's been offline for a while, for some reason the agent wasn't checking in, you've resolved that issue.
Yep.
Now you can get fresh data. Because remember, all this information is static that we're pulling from the database. This isn't live from the agent machine of itself. We have to gather that information, collect it in the database before we can present it to you here.
Exactly. Now, it's updated at least once a day by the schedule. We usually advise people to set this up so that it's updated twice a day, but this is set on your own system. Now, there's several choices on the bottom menu. Current patches was displayed right now, and these are the current patches that apply to TimVM. It's very straightforward. The choice beneath it, Patch History, gives you a list of patches installed by date. So you'll be able to find out when 2018-10 Security and Quality Rollup for .NET Framework was installed. It is not set, but it was installed. So who installed it and when? If it's not set, it was probably installed by hand by somebody. This will enable you to figure that out. You can follow the audit trail and see exactly what happened when. The next choice below it, Patch Jobs, is a list of appointments in the Patch Manager to patch, kept or not. It gives you a full list of all the patch scheduled windows he's had and what happened. Was he online? Did he patch? Did all these patches install? Did some of them fail? All that stuff is saved under Patch Jobs. So that's the patch history from the Automate server. The next one down, Windows Update Logs, is the patch history from the machine itself. If patching goes wrong, those are great things to compare with each other. This way you can find out, okay, Automate sent all the patches down, so this is good, and then on the machine, 4 installed and 1 failed. Looks like it failed on the machine, we'll start there. Does it guarantee that's where it failed? No, but that's where the evidence leads, so you start there.
There you go. At least you have all the evidence in one place for you.
On one screen.
And then
Yeah.
you can see, hey, I didn't approve this in Automate. How did it get approved on the system? That might happen with the Windows 10 box, something
yeah.
like that, because we know Microsoft's now saying, hey, we don't trust you people to patch your machines. We're going to go ahead and do that for you. So sometimes that might be a situation. This way you have all that information. You're not blindly feeling around in the dark. You have this information here for you, so you can take a look at it, dive into it a little bit more. Okay, Automate thinks that Automate didn't patch anything for this. It doesn't know what happened, but the Windows Update log says this was sent in by the user. Technician logged in, did it
Sure.
through control. I can get more information that way.
Yep. All that stuff is kept in those logs. The last choice on it is the groups list. This shows all the patching groups to which this computer is assigned. Policies are assigned to patching groups. We'll get to that later. And this gives you a great effective policy view of patching on that computer when you click on the groups menu. It is one of my favorite features of this devices screen. Approvals. This is where we set manual approvals on approval policies. The policies are in the top left there. Start default is the master policy that all your computers get. And then we have the other policies as set up by the system. I've added third-party defaults myself. The top window has discovered patches. This means patches that you have yet to assign a goal to. You have yet to approve it to install, deny, ignore, or remove. Interestingly enough, if you assign a patch to remove when it's new or at any other time, it will also act as a deny. If it's found on a system, it'll remove it. But if something, if it can, thank you, very important to know. But if it's slated to install on a system, but it is denied, or rather set to remove, it's the same as a deny. It will not install. So you select a policy there, and then you would click a patch on the right side, and then give it a goal. The check mark is install. The circle slash is ignore. The garbage can, surprise, is deny. Actually, that's remove. The X is deny. And this is going to approve the patch. You can see in the lower window, these are the set patches that have already been approved, either by an automatic system, like the one that we've highlighted here, Server 2012 update, the approval setting, it says approve, which means we've put our stamp on this one and given it a goal, you can click on that. It's a hot link and change the approval to any one of the other settings. This one's set to install, and it was set by the automatic system. And the policy number is whatever policy set it. These are the same filters we had before. The approval policies, which are the focus here, act as the same as the client and location did before, because we're separating out patches in this case. And the filters allow you to separate out computers because those are what is going to be applying these patches to. So if I clicked on Windows Server 2008 R264, I'd only see the patches that applied to a Server 2008 64 in this window. This allows you to get granular with it and decide, okay, how many boxes am I actually talking about? Which of these things are going to be Exchange boxes, because they take special care in feeding, as you've noticed, and you definitely mentioned that about lawyers, and they love their email.
So that brings up another interesting point, because I know you pointed out that policy, and that was something that always confused me when I first started looking at this. So that's the number of policies that this machine is under, or this particular patch is under, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it could be a server OS, and it could also be an Exchange server. So in that scenario, there might be certain patches I automatically deny because I don't trust them on my Exchange servers because they are so critical for me.
Sure.
Or your GPO servers, things along that
Yeah.
nature. Whatever you have, whatever's critical to your client's business, you can start adding these additional filters to that to layer on top of all the other things. So by default, you can say, okay, all these servers, I want these patches approved. For this particular OS or for this particular job or type of server, let's get a little bit more stringent with those automatic approvals and then manually go through that process.
Well said. Yeah. And up top here, we have the single patch we've discussed that has yet to be approved. We can tell that red dot in the top right corner, that means that there are patches that have to be approved in star default. That's it. The bottom half has the patches that are already set. As we've discussed, we can see the CVSS score. We can click on that one and go to that rating. We can click on the KBID and get the care and feeding page from Microsoft. Bulletins are going by the by. They're not going to be used by Microsoft much more, but roll-ups and security updates generally have bulletin numbers. It's an additional sheet of information about the patch. If there is a bulletin number available for it, I always click on it because there's often useful stuff in there about whether you can remove it, what it's for, what it shouldn't be used with, and that stuff can be important. The rest of the objects in here, the policies, as DBB has explained, you can have several different policies the same patch is approved for. And it can be approved to install for servers, and as he pointed out, it can be approved to be denied for Exchange servers, because it'll work on everything, but it'll break Exchange. And that would be a 2 next to it, as is the lower one below it, the security update for Windows Server. There's a 2 right there. And that's that, which takes us to configuration, which we reach with the top right corner there. This looks like old school equalizer sliders. And we go back to the configuration section up top there. These are the different aspects of this group. We have groups, which we're looking at right here, which are where we set policies. Policies are built up from Microsoft update policies, which are when we patch. Reboot policies, which are how we finish patching. And again, you don't always have to reboot. Only one type of patch requires that, but we have to put a reboot policy with every update policy to make it work. That's the rules of the system. And then we have approval policies, which we saw on the last slide. Can I go back? Yes, I can. Those are the approval policies there. And those are set on the approval policies column. Now, if you look on this, we have 2 different types of groups. We have approval groups and we have patch install groups. Approvals get set on approval groups. This allows you to have group memberships that distribute these patches among all your servers, all your workstations, and everybody gets patched. We schedule things in a different group. This gives us flexibility. We'll go into this more when we're discussing the policies in a future webinar. But it comes down to the fact that the approval groups have the approval policies set on them, and the patch install groups have update policies when and reboot policies, how we're going to finish. And that's the difference between the 2. And we go to the Microsoft Update Policies section to set those. We go to the Reboot Policies to set those, and Approval Policies to create those and set those.
Now that's really a recommended practice that we in education like to push to people. Theoretically, you could put the reboot policy and the approval policy and the install policy all in one package. It's possible, but then that's going to start getting confusing for you.
You give up flexibility.
Yeah, you're going to get stuck in a very rigid system that's going to make your life a lot more difficult.
Sure. I've been through setting up Patch Manager for partners many times, and we keep on getting back to the idea if you do it according to these rules, it lets you get your patching up and running successfully quick, and then you can start fleshing out special cases. Because most of what this is trying to get one policy to cover everybody. That's the star default. And that gives everybody their daily helping of patches. And then we have the individual policies that will do the one-offs, like servers for Exchange servers, rather.
Sure.
SQL servers, things like that. Things that require individual patching schemes. And if you can see across the patch install workstations, as I mentioned, we have a update policy, we have a reboot policy, we don't have any approval policies. Same thing with servers. Now, that's it for today. Hi everybody,
Hey, how's it going?
I'm Arthur,
I'm Devin.
and we're here to present Patch Manager Part 1, Questions and Answers. Let's go. Why does Patch Manager default to the first client when you open up the dashboard in the Patch Manager instead of global? This was by design, actually. The developers had it originally set to go to global, and on their test setup, where you had 5 computers that are being patched, it loaded adequately fast. When you got it on a production setup where you had 100 or more computers, it didn't load fast enough for anybody's satisfaction. So by changing it to the first client on the list, you're loading a much smaller set of data, so your information pops up much quicker and the entire display resolves faster, so you can do whatever you were trying to do and not have to wait for the computer to bring up all that information.
All right.
Our next question, how are the devices and the patches screens different? Well, there are different perspectives on the same information. If you're looking at the devices screen, you're sorting the patches by computers, which are the devices. So if you have a list of computers on the top and you select one, it shows you the patches that apply to that computer on the bottom. On the patches screen, it's the other way around. You have a list of patches up top and you select one, and it shows you the computers that can apply to that patch. It's the same information, you're just looking at it from 2 different perspectives.
Sure. So it's really about how you're working on it. Are you working on a single machine, making sure everything's sorted out and patched up correctly? Or are you making sure, hey, there's a vulnerability patch that we have to address. I want to make sure that every single workstation and every single server has this patch installed. So I'm going to flip the view for that perspective to get that information.
Which is why those 2 screens are so very valuable. Devices shows patches sorted by computers, and etc. I like it when we say what's supposed to be on the slides. Now, how do the Windows Update logs differ from the patch job log? This is again another situation where we've got the same event being recorded by 2 different perspectives, in this case 2 different machines. The Windows Update log is what happens on the actual endpoint, on the Microsoft Windows operating system that's being patched. This is a record of what's being changed on it, what patches are being installed on it, when it happened. The patch job log is the automate record of this information, and it just lists when the patch job started, what patches were sent, what the resolution of the entire patch job was. So you can see what happens up to the point where we send the patches to the machine in the patch job log, and then you look at the Windows Update log and you see what happened on the Windows machine, and then you go back to the patch job log to see how did automate finish this. So they're important perspectives on the same set of information.
Sure.
And that's why they're both available in the Patch Manager. Like we said, different perspectives. Now, the best practice for disabling an individual computer's update, and I popped up the answer up here because we're going to talk about it. There's more than one way. The best way to do it is to create a policy that's never going to take place. You set it for a date that's never going to happen, February 31st. if you're in a week that has a February 31st, you've got more problems than just patching. So we use this one as a reliable non-event so that we can schedule this to happen. So the way that we used to do it was to have a do not patch policy, which does exist in Automate. And this uses the UI disabled feature that turns off the user interface for patching on the endpoint. Makes it impossible for the machine to patch itself.
Okay.
Now, this is great, except for certain versions of Windows 10 and Server 2016. That UI disabled function does not exist until they are on 18 something or later.
Okay.
I've got the details on here. No, apparently I don't. It'll be on the next one. But if you don't have a certain version of your Windows 10, you don't have the function to disable the Windows Update. So we really recommend just scheduling it for February 31st.
So that was more on the Microsoft side of things than something that was in Automate, correct?
Absolutely.
Because that was part of their whole conversation, and that's always been something we've been struggling with Windows 10 and Server 2016.
Absolutely.
They want to push patches out. They don't trust us anymore to handle patching our own systems. Microsoft got tired of being blamed for everything, so they started forcing patches down, and there's not really much we can do.
Nope.
When it comes to that, it is their software. They want to push something. We can't hold them from that.
But we're going to talk about that today and what we can do about that.
Okay.
So
there you go.
let's continue on with the questions in order. How do you handle reboots in the Server 2016? At first I thought this was a no-brainer question because we use the reboot policy to reboot a 2016 the same way you reboot everything. But I asked some of the guys in support who deal with this every day. A colleague who's done a lot of work in Patch Manager and a lot more work in Windows logging discovered that we don't record, Windows does not record the Automate command to reboot your system. It doesn't catch it in the logs. It happens flawlessly. But if you're trying to track an event in the Windows logs, it's not going to be there. So you have this vacancy in the logs. So my colleague recommended that you might consider creating a script, a Windows script, to reboot that box, and then call it in the Patch Manager policy run script before patching slot.
Oh, interesting.
This way, you are telling the system to reboot itself, but you're telling it to do it with a script that runs in Windows that'll be recorded in the Windows logs. So, how do you reboot a 2016? Use a reboot policy. If your system or your network or your administrator or your boss has a requirement for you guys to have this in the Windows logs, you're better off writing a script. And that piece I learned just by asking a colleague who knew more than I did. How are you handling Windows 10 release updates and feature patches? Well, we do handle it in the update policy. Let me pull up I've got an Automate here, handy. Ta-da. Zip over the right side. Further. Click configuration. Update policies. So on the right edge here, we have Windows 10 options, version 17.03 or later. So if you are on version 17.03 for 2016 or 10, you can use this feature. If you're not, the calls don't exist in the operating system to do this. So we can't delay these features. So once you update your system to 17.03 or the later versions in 18 or whatever we're up to today, you'll be able to use this feature. Now, semi-annual channel, we want to select it to semi-annual channel. Targeted gets you updates sooner than everybody else. Do nothing doesn't affect anything. So we want to click semi-annual. Now, the feature updates are the major numbers. 17.03 is a feature update. 18.03 is a feature update. You can delay those for a whole year. You can delay it right there by just clicking this feature update drop-down, and you can select 1 to 365 and delay it for a whole year if you like. And at 366 days, you get the next version. There's no way to stop that. Microsoft's insisting on it, and they're forcing this through. Quality updates, the regular monthly things, you can delay for a month. And again, we can't affect that. This is Microsoft doing their operating system maintenance. And we can, as I showed, delay this if you're on 17.03 or later. But beyond that, we can't affect it. and this is Microsoft. We are working hard to try and see if we can get more of this regulated, but they literally pay no attention to anybody, and they're going to enforce their operating system rules. So we have to work with this.
Yeah, which again, I can understand from their perspective. They don't want to be accused of messing up somebody's system. They are coming around from their original plan because I believe before 1706, they just said, hey, we're going to be patching systems. We don't trust you guys.
Right.
So this is them stepping into a direction saying, okay, maybe we're a bit too draconian with this. We're going to give you guys some negotiation with this, but we still want to make sure you are patching systems up for security purposes and other reasons.
Absolutely. And we understand that some of these patches don't come out right. Sometimes there was the February massacre of last year where all these video cards simply stopped working because Microsoft. And if you didn't have a rollback already created, restore point on your system, you were done. You had this patch and you were not going to see your screen ever again. So
I mean, you don't really need a screen to...
it's optional. It
yeah,
really is.
I mean...
Install control and you're good to go.
There you
All right?
go.
That's all you need.
Problem solved.
So we understand completely that you might want to delay some of these things long enough to find out if there's a problem with it. So that feature is what we use to do that with. We find that 30 days is sufficient for the features, and for the quality ones and for the feature updates, a year is more than enough to sort that stuff out. So there's the date and the numbers of it. Now, Windows 10 must be running 1703 or later in order to do these things. Because remember, those abilities to delay this don't exist in the operating system until you install 1703.
All right.
Some patches are 100 to 900 days old. Will the system auto-purge these if they're superseded? Yes. Let's talk about what superseded means. Superseded, in the Microsoft sense, is when a patch is issued. We're going to say patch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it is out there, it installs a patch, and at some point, 1 minute to 10 years later, Microsoft releases another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, same KBID number. That will supersede the original number, because you can't have two patches with the same number.
Sure.
It's a numerical thing. So when they do that, they're literally pulling the first patch out of their catalog. It's no longer available. And the other patch takes its place. So with that in mind, let me bring up our Automate again, and we will go to our we are going to our I'm going to patches. There we are. Minor brain fart. And there we go. No, I'm going to be in the wrong. I'm in global. Excellent. So 492 days. That's nothing. Let's see if we can really rack up some. I believe we have a 2,795 day old patch here.
Oh, wow.
That's 9 years.
Now that's a live system.
That's live. This is running on our training server right now.
Oh.
It's a Windows 2008 R2 server. So it's 10 years old. It's got patches that are 10 years old because it's using them right now. It's been deployed to every computer, 100% compliance, 100% deployment. Every computer that can use it has it. It's using it. The one below it, there, this is also a 2008 R2 security update that's not installed on anything. And it's still there because the number hasn't been reused. That's all it is. So if you have really old patches on your system, Microsoft still thinks they're being used, or operating systems are out there that can use them, like 2008 R2.
Okay.
And that's all it is. It's bookkeeping. So supersedence, which you usually see featuring hugely in the Windows 10 feature updates, those things that come out every month.
Right, because those are the enhancement ones where it's rolling up all the patches that have come out
Yes.
previous to that, and it's a scalable option from there.
Exactly. People complain because these roll-ups have bunches of patches and they want to install this one but not that one, and it's all or nothing. And it's forced in after 30 days anyway, so you spend as much time as possible trying to figure out if there's anything that's going to blow up your system, and then you install it. So those numbers, the monthly patches, use the same number every month. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 will be replaced by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 next month. And it will be the June roll-up to the July roll-up. And the July roll-up has everything the June roll-up has, plus the July patches. They're all inclusive. So if you miss a month, which you can't because it gets forced in, but in theory, you're not missing a thing by just installing the next patch. So,
Okay.
and if you're patching machine up for the first time, you just need this month's patch, not the long string of patches before it, which don't exist because they've all been replaced by the current month's patches because they've been superseded. The patch is released with the next iteration of this month's patches with the same KB number we used last month.
So if they're seeing some of these old ones in there, that's because they probably have a machine that has the older KBI system that Microsoft was using, or they weren't superseding the numbers like they were
They
beforehand.
didn't have to. This patch is still live, is still being used.
Yeah.
And so
They didn't do roll-ups back then, so
They didn't. There was no need to.
unless it was a service pack, if I
Right.
remember correctly.
Which is what they did before they started doing these service updates.
Right.
Right. So what we have is this patch is 2795 days old, is still good, and is still in the system because we got a 15-year-old or 10-year-old operating system.
Hey, old reliable's doing what it needs to do. We're
Yeah,
not
it
gonna
is.
we're not gonna mess with that poor machine.
That's just fine. So lose the display over here and back to our screens. There's our superseded. So Microsoft will always supersede patches that are re-released. And that brings us to the end of those questions.
Yeah,
Devin,
but we
have
did get some
ones.
live ones that did just pop up. So let's see what we can do for these. So what's the best way to fix systems that show WSUS enabled?
Excellent question. WSUS is the Windows Server Update Server System. Let me say that again. Windows Server Update Service. I speak English. And this is the Microsoft system for mass patching. And it's for managed patching. And the idea is that you build yourself a WSUS server, another Windows object, in a Windows server that has a patch repository, very much like what we do. As a matter of fact, we took our model for patching from this WSUS model and then expanded it. But you have a list of patches you've approved in the WSUS server. And then you, on your own computer or on your network, schedule for your computers a schedule to install, reboot, and that's it. They have an approval policy, that list of things in the WSUS server, and an install time and reboot time, same way we do. Only if WSUS is enabled on an endpoint system, server, or workstation, it is looking for that WSUS server somewhere. There's a URL that's put into your system by the administrator, and again, this is all Microsoft stuff. So if your Automate says that WSUS is enabled, there is something on that machine, it could be a GPO, it could be a registry setting, that is or both, that is pointing to a distant server for its patches. So it's not going to use the Windows Update and is unable, in most cases, there are some that it can use both, but in most cases it's unable to use the Automate patching system. So if you have WSUS enabled, this is a indicator to click on that tile and find the systems that are affected this way. And this is a flag saying you need to look at these systems and see why WSUS is turned on them and if it's interfering with Automate. It's very possible to have a mixed system where some of your systems are being patched with WSUS and some of them are patched with Automate. They can coexist just fine, but you need to make arrangements for that. You can't just do this automatically out of the box, and we don't automatically patch systems enabled with WSUS. You have to arrange that in your system. So,
Which we have all documented out. You can use
Yes.
the separate wizard for that, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
That will dive through and get you to configure those pieces.
but that's a Microsoft thing. That's a Microsoft Wizard.
We're just, yeah, at that point, we're just
Right.
monitoring, or we don't have a specific monitor set. Let me rephrase that. We're just watching what's happening with those systems at that
There's a
point.
registry flag for WSUS enabled, and that's what it's seeing. So it's just seeing something in your registry is turned on, and it could be a problem with Automate patching.
Okay,
Next question.
yeah. So, is it too soon to talk about deployment stages and how best to use them or how to use them?
It's never too soon to talk about deployment. We are talking about it in the next webinar too. which is coming up very soon in the end of November. And briefly, stages are done this way. There is the test stage, which is, let me bring this up so we can actually do an image of it, because I prefer to work with pictures.
Pictures are nice. So if I remember correctly, there's 3 stages that we have within the system. We have your test, your pilot, and then your production.
Yep. Right here, the second with the dashboard.
Alrighty.
And there we are. We have test, pilot, and production. And by default, all computers are in production. That is the stage that has all your systems running in it. Test and pilot are supposed to be experiments. Your test stage should be set up at your own physical location. It should be machines that you can touch, so that you'd have, let's say you only have 5 different systems in your network. You've got Windows 10 systems, you've got Windows 8 systems, you've got Server 2012, you've got Server 2016, and you've got a SQL Server. So that's 5 different kinds of machines. So you'd want to set up those boxes or an example of those boxes in your test stage.
Sure.
This way you could set them up so they get their patches a week before. I like working in increments of a week. We'll discuss why. A week before your pilot stage gets it. This way, if any of these patches have a problem, it's going to blow up something in your office that you can see, not on a client, not on a mission critical server somewhere else that you can't reach. So if it blows up your SQL server, that's going to be a problem for your SQL database, but you've got it right there. So you can handle those problems as they show up. You won't then deploy this to your next stage, pilot. You'll pull that patch out of the distribution. So a week later, it rolls over and all those patches move into the pilot stage. And if you have the same type of computers at some of your clients, in something that they've agreed they can afford to lose these 5 computers should things go horribly wrong. They're not the production systems, they're not the CEO's computer, it's not the one assistant who runs everything, not their systems, but these are less important test systems at your clients, and if any of those systems gets blown up by these patches, well, clients have special programs they run on their computers that don't exist in the NOC, so if your medical licensing program gets blown up by a .NET patch, well, we don't have to distribute that patch to you guys because that one's a problem for you. And you have to discover this with Microsoft, find out what the problem is, and go that way. But you then pull that patch from the ones that are going to end up in production the next week. So you have 2 chances to make mistakes in places that mistakes are allowed, they're expected, and you're ready to deal with them, so that when they go out to the vast majority of your clients, everything works as it should.
Okay. So your test stage should be those guys in your office that you really don't like. Their machine should be in there. Your pilot,
Or the most talented guys, and they're often the same.
I like the guys I don't like. I'm going to put them in the test one.
Used to be a manager.
Then we'll go into the pilot stage. These are machines that we're going to be watching, especially when we know that we're going to be pushing patches out to them. But these are not going to be mission critical systems. We're not going to be putting a server that's running an EMR or an Exchange server into this pilot stage. We want these to be test machines that are going to have some of those pieces of software that we know are going to be at this office. So if something does break, we know, okay, let's fix this one machine, but it's not going to be the entire office that's down.
Right. Pilot is real world testing.
Got it. Okay. And then we go into production. Everybody's getting it. We know what's going on, and we can go from there.
The reason I suggested 1 week long stages is because typically people patch their systems once a week. I recommend patching workstations every day and servers once a week, but that's just me. You are the captain of your own ship. You set your own schedules and your own policies. And typically the most common ones, we get 1 patch cycle per week.
Sure.
So that's why I suggest that you set the stages to once a week, because you have to have a patching event during the stage to test it out. Otherwise, I mean, if you don't have a patch event during your test, the patches roll over to pilot, they never get tested.
Gotcha. Okay.
So once a week works perfectly.
Yeah, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this.
Absolutely.
Once we get into, is it part 2 or part 3 that you're going to be talking about?
Both.
Fantastic.
It's gonna feature in both.
Okay. So one more question when it comes to these patching groups. This partner wants to be able to set up patching groups or these stages, the staging groups. He wants to look at these in searches. So he can look at what patches are actually being pushed out in these particular sections. Is it possible to build a search based off of a staging group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm not going to do it here for us,
Okay.
but there should be a
Do we have a data view or something like that where we have
patch
those?
stage filters.
Oh, fantastic. So we have that within the patch manager of itself. If you're looking to do something within...
It is a searchable advanced search feature.
Okay, fantastic. So you should have the options to see that in the advanced searches. We might go a little bit deeper now that we know that's something people
Yeah.
are interested in.
We'll definitely
we can
bring
add
that up.
that to part 2 or
Sure.
part 3. Okay. All right. Do you have a link for resolving the missing baseline issue? I couldn't find it in the Automate documentation.
Actually, I've got one here that
Okay.
I set up my old LabTech,
Your what?
my old Automate.
Ah, that's $1.
This was the name of a notebook. Pardon me. So these are the 3 patches. There's only 3 missing baselines.
So you want to go, because I'm not as familiar with this as you are, so if you want to go into a little bit of history about what they're talking about?
Yep. So baseline patches. There are certain patches that are supposed to be installed by your operating system when it's being installed in your system for the first time.
Okay.
That's why they're called baseline.
Makes sense.
There's only 3. These literally enable your system to see Windows Update.
Ah, okay.
So without these 3 patches, you can't see Windows Update and you can't get a baseline of patches. You can't get your first download. You can't
So
see
the
anything.
Windows Update agent does not work unless you have these baseline patches installed on a machine.
It's like gasoline. Yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
And let me pop up here. We go over to the right. Those are the 3 patch numbers, and I will release this for you guys later on today. I'll put it into a note for us. But you type it in here into the search box, and it automatically pops up the systems with that KB number.
So you're going to have to manually push these out to these machines in order to get those Windows updates.
Well, you scroll down here, you find the systems that need it. This one, maybe. But if you notice, he's got it, but it's not attempted. And that's because he's offline.
Makes sense.
That's it.
Can't push patches to an offline machine.
But that's how you sort them.
Okay. So you can find those machines. You're not going to be able to push those out through Automate, though.
Absolutely you can.
Oh, you can? Even
Yeah.
though the... Okay. Well, there you go.
Because he's on Automate, and his computer's got an agent on it, and we're just telling him to install these 3 patches, which once he's got it, he can go find them.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Gotcha. Okay. Fantastic. All right, so we'll leave that up there for 1 second so he can frantically copy that down while we talk about this next question. If you run a Windows update manually on a computer, does it break the patch manager for that particular device?
No.
Nope.
No, it does not.
Okay.
What it will do is it'll give you confusing logs.
Oh.
Because let's say you have a system where something has been told by Automate to install, and you went ahead and installed it yourself before Automate had a chance to do it.
So before the patch window, before the reboot, all
Right.
those pieces. Got it.
So you're going to get a patch was attempted but not installed by Automate, and on the Windows Update logs on the Microsoft side, you'll see patch installed. And when you get to a display up top like that, I won't show it here, but if you have something where it says deployment is 0, compliance is 100%,
that's
means
where that's... Okay.
Automate didn't deploy it, but he's 100% compliant, he's already got it.
Okay. So that's when you're going to have to dig into the different logs and say, okay, so who did push this out?
Exactly.
Oh, Jim got a call while he was on the machine. He decided to just go ahead and patch it up because he was right there working on it.
We also see a lot of this in systems that are joined to Automate after they've been online for a week, a year, a month, because they'll be installing patches on their own. So they'll have typically a large amount of baseline patches for whatever they were installing beforehand. So they'll have a lot of 100% compliance, zero deployments,
Gotcha.
because it was installed before they got to automate.
Okay. Makes sense. Alrighty. So the next question is there a way to use WSUS in combination with the patch manager to hold all the updates and then have them picked up from the WSUS rather than the internet?
It sounds like what he's talking about is patch caching.
Right.
But let's talk about the way he addressed it. Yes, it's possible for WSUS to create a list of your patches, and then you give a command to WSUS to download those patches to your endpoints, because it doesn't actually download to any servers. It downloads to the endpoints and it gets distributed from there. Automate can do the same thing, but if you're telling WSUS to do it,
But you're going to have to physically go to the WSUS machine, or not physically, but remote into the WSUS machine and have it do it through the Microsoft system. You can't do that through Automate.
I don't think you can.
Okay.
No. I'm not actually certain. I'll review this one and get back to you guys to make sure, but I
Okay.
do know that you can have WSUS operating in tandem with Automate. You can have WSUS take over for Automate. And back to what I think the original questioner was asking, can you have a list of patches downloaded to a computer that you can then have your endpoints patch off of that? Yes, you can. We've got something called patch caching that is very useful in situations. Many of our Australian partners do not have hardwired internet connections. They have to use satellite internet, which if they've got weather issues, this is a problem.
Sure.
But it's a low bandwidth solution. So they don't typically have large amounts of data throwing across this network. So they would have one computer at their location or at their company download all the patches for that location. And the computers assigned at this location would be pointing at that directory to grab the patches from. This way there's only one set of downloads. We don't have every computer downloading every patch. This way everything's downloaded once, not if you got 15 computers 15 times. It helps save bandwidth. And that is detailed in the documents. Look up patch caching. It has improved that set of docs quite a lot in the last few years.
Yeah.
So that is very functional these days.
Yeah. I know back again in my management and support days, our Australian partners love that functionality, and it was one of the primary reasons that they used Automate was to have that kind of functionality for it. So
Yeah.
and that also saves you because you don't have to go into that WSUS server and then Automate. You can have Automate still handle all those pieces and not have to have that other touch point that you have to address.
Exactly.
Because that's going to add complexity to it.
And to go back to an earlier question, patch caching will also support supersedence. So if you've got your patches cached there and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is re-released, it's going to replace the current 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 the way it should. So it'll operate exactly the way it should.
Right. If you run the Windows update manually on a computer and the patch manager starts showing zero deployment and 100% compliance on the machine, will it eventually correct itself, or will it report like that forever?
It reports like that forever because it records the fact that Windows installed the patch, zero deployment, and it's installed correctly, 100% compliance. That's accurate.
Okay.
Resolving that would not reflect what actually happened.
Gotcha. So really I think I'm getting the crux of that is then it becomes a coaching situation with your client. Hey, I know that the deployment says zero. That's because we manually pushed them because we wanted to make sure everything was safe and secure. We didn't go through our automated system. The compliance is what you really should be focused on, and that's showing 100% because we wanted to make sure those patches were deployed to your machine.
Conversely, if the engineer or the administrator had pushed the patches through Automate, it would show up as 100% deployment,
Gotcha.
or whatever amount of that patches have been deployed for that system. So
Okay.
whatever it was, it would have a deployment score.
So that's when you're going to see a difference between your deployment score and your compliance score. And we keep that record for historical references because we don't want to say, oh yeah, Automate deployed everything for you, because that's really what we're saying when we're saying deployment is deployment through Automate, not just patch deployment in general.
Patch compliance is a record of is it there? Patch deployment is who did it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That makes sense. Take care, guys.
Thank you.